In this video, I'm going to give a bunch of tips for World Carnivore Month. The reason I'm doing this is I see a lot of people online doing the carnivore diet and they don't really know what they're doing. And they're making this experience worse for them than it really needs to be. Now, I've done this 3 times and I have a better idea of what I'm doing now than when I did so the first time a year ago. So I'm going to make this video a list of tips of sort to try to help anyone that's interested before they spend a lot of time, effort, and money doing this poorly. So hopefully this will help them in their journey. So carnivory is a way of eating that can be really good, as you have to put a little thought into it. But as with any diet, you can make a lot of mistakes and sabotage your experience with it. And I would like you to avoid that. So with that said, let's get started. So plan ahead. Now I'm speaking generically here for the moment, but it's a good idea to wrap your head around this before you do it, so you're aware of your options before you buy a bunch of food. Now the last thing you want to do is walk into a Costco and spend $200 on a small selection of animal-based foods without any sort of plan. So you want to get something like a notebook or a diary or some sort of document or text file on your computer or in the cloud, and you want to be composing everything on that. You should also be prepared to make revisions and updates over time and even start from scratch on new sheets of paper in order to get this right before you start spending any money. And I personally use Google Docs to write down everything, and I'm always updating each document over time over the years. As new information comes in, or I change my mind and I want to do something else, or I want to buy something else, etc., etc. So those are the things you want to keep in mind. Budget. You need to set aside money that you need to do this in advance. So when you get paid, you set aside maybe $50, $100, whatever. Find out what your financial limits are for that first week you're going to do this, and use the budget for that week on every subsequent week as a sort of a good estimate. So if you're going to spend like $70 on week 1, it's likely you'll spend $70 on week 2, 3, and 4, thereabouts. Most people have limits on the amount of money they can spend. So does this guy. So do you, most likely. And it might be $100 a week, for all the food that you can buy for yourself, including eating out, alcohol, all that kind of stuff. By the time you're watching this video, I think you'll have a better idea and more information, to help you make good choices so that you can spend that money, so you can afford higher quality meats rather than bargain basement stuff. You want to avoid those terrible options. Schedule your meals. You're going to eat daily, so it's best to decide what times you're going to eat each day. Are you going to eat in the early morning, say late morning or early afternoon? Are you going to eat in the early evening or late evening, or maybe you're towards bed? Those kinds of decisions you want to sort of make in advance. Now you may already know the answers to this sort of a question, but it's best to sort of finalize that for the weeks and months to come. You may even choose to prepare all your meals one day a week, like on a Sunday for the rest of the week. So you spend an hour or so dividing everything up and so on and so forth. Or each day, like say in the morning, you may prepare 2 or 3 meals a day, or before each meal you go ahead and bring out everything you need and you go ahead and prepare each meal. So I personally, since I eat twice a day, I prepare everything just before each meal. So I'll spend like 10 minutes before I'm making the food, getting everything lined up and itemized and everything like that. But everyone's different, and you want to build a schedule for every day of your week so you know how best to plan your food. So the kind of foods you're going to consume. The carnivore diet can be cheaper than many other diets because you're only buying food. You're not buying snacks, desserts, supplements, candies, or even drinks. And ideally, you're not relying on eating out as a source of nutrition. Not to say you can't plan for eating out sometimes, but most restaurants don't prepare meats as well as they could, and those that do cost a lot of money to eat there. Variety. You want to eat different meals each day. Don't just eat steak and eggs for the entire month, even though that's something you could do. Don't just eat beef and avoid all the other possible animal sources. Let's say you eat twice daily like me for a week. In 1 week, that's roughly 14 meals. So in theory, you could have 14 different foods throughout that week. Or you could just eat one food all week. You can even have 2 or more things in each and every meal. So theoretically, you could have dozens of foods you consume over a week's time. And I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying that my advice to you is be flexible in what you're willing to eat on this diet, as I think that really helps with adherence, and I think it also prevents boredom. It also helps with satiety. You want to be satisfied on this diet, right? So this is the time to allow yourself some diversity in this diet. This has more to do with mental satisfaction than anything else. You could, in theory, get a healthy enough diet eating just a handful of the best foods over and over and over, with the right organ meats eaten occasionally. I'm just saying that you want to make this diet more interesting over time, especially if you're trying it for the first time, as your only constraint should be what you're willing to set for yourself, not what others set for you. So allow yourself to eat more than one type of food. Take cattle, for example. There's brisket, chuck steak, round steak, tenderloin, top loin, sirloin, short loin, flank, roasts, ribs, and more. And that's before you get to organ meat. And once you get outside the world of beef, you have pork, like pigs, boar, wagyu. You also have poultry like ducks, turkey, not just chicken. There's also a variety of eggs you can consume. You also have meat like deer, lamb, and bison. And in some countries, you even have horse meat, dog, and cat meat. The world of seafood is something else entirely. So you can see you have a lot of options here. Quality. Don't settle for the cheapest foods or the cheapest versions of any food that you could buy. Be mindful of meal composition. You may not want to spend a lot of money on this diet, and the good news is you don't have to, but you do need vitamins and minerals. And there are bargain basement meats out there with very little nutritional value. You want to avoid those. You want to buy foods that are grass-fed, pasture-raised, free-range, organic, and or non-GMO when possible. And some of these attributes are more important than others, and some work best with others. Just don't limit yourself to what the local grocery store is or the nearest Walmart or Costco. Consider visiting an actual meat market in your town or city. Or if you're out in the boonies, do research on meat markets in nearby towns or cities. And consider making just one visit a week there during this month. That way you can basically go there, get all the food you want, and then come home and then get set up. Quality is better than quantity. But speaking of quantity, don't overeat or undereat. Eat to satiety, but be rational about food amounts on each plate. Your stomach can only fit so much in it. You want to try to avoid binge eating on this diet. Unfortunately, this diet contributes to you not binge eating, but it's easy to sort of get caught up into that, especially if you have a history of doing it. Eat slowly if you have to. It can be easy to overeat, even on this one. And while your body may tell you when you're full, sometimes human nature allows us to override the signals that the human body sends us. And you risk harming yourself if you eat too much or if you eat too little. But that's not something that's as harmful on a nutritionally complete diet. So you can afford to undereat sometimes. And you have to keep that in mind as you're going through this. So a good rule of thumb is to eat any meal roughly the size of your clenched fist. If you were to roll up everything on your plate or in your bowl to about this size, most likely that is a good meal size for you, because that is essentially everything that would fit into your stomach. Now, it's easy on a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet to have too much fat and send too much food to your stomach, even if it fits into your stomach just fine. But you can sort of pace yourself and allocate just what's needed in terms of fat. But just try to think about how much food you're going to need for each and every meal, and only make as much food as you need for that meal. No more and no less. That way you're satisfied once you've cleared off that plate. And then make that food and then enjoy it, and don't worry about it. You don't want to make that decision after you put in the time and after to cook your meals, because then you feel obligated to eat everything on your plate. So if it's a really large plate, you may want to eat it all, and you may not want to set some aside and store it, You know, some people are really picky about, oh, it might lose some of its nutrients if you put it in the fridge and then reheat it. So you want to avoid that situation when possible. Timing. Now this can be controversial, time restricted feeding or time restricted eating, intermittent fasting, things of that nature. But I personally recommend people eat 2 to 3 times a day, unless you're really stuck with a routine like OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, or you have a requirement around certain exercises or sports. Let's say you eat before and after each meal and you exercise twice daily, then in theory you would want to sort of time your meals maybe an hour before, then an hour after your first exercise, then your second exercise, maybe another hour before and after. So you might eat 4 times, that day. So just throwing that out there. There isn't a rigid rule here, but I think 2 or 3 times a day, maybe even 4 times a day is fine. I personally only eat twice a day, as I've mentioned earlier in this video. This can go hand in hand with my tip prior on scheduling. But given the size of your stomach, you just don't want to overstuff yourself. And some of your food will transit, in its entirety through your digestive system. So it's not like it all just ends up in your stomach, stays there for 2 days, and then leaves. A lot of it just happens to pass through. But it's a good rule of thumb to eat no more than what will fit in your stomach, unless you're trying something like OMAD or AFD. Alternate day fasting, for example, that's great, where you might eat like 2 meals on one day and then go an entire day without eating, then come back and then eat normally. Some people do that for weight loss. Consistency. Stay on track for the full month. Don't break this way of eating for parties or if you're just hanging out with some friends and family and y'all go to eat out. This is just for a month unless you choose to do it longer than that. Now you might make an exception for like a birthday, especially your own, but most people will not fault you for staying on track on a diet. And if it's your own birthday, you might plan ahead with others who are involved with preparing, for that occasion before they spring a cake on you. And worst case, you just eat a slice of cake and you get back on the carnivore diet. Try not to kill yourself over this. After all, this is for your physical health and your mental health, and you want to enjoy this experience. And a slice of cake once in a month is not going to destroy your diet or destroy your experience here. So don't fail to enjoy yourself. Just try really hard to do this diet as thoroughly as possible. So since we're on this topic of adherence, don't eat or drink anything from outside the animal kingdom if you can at all help it. That's really the point of carnivore, and among some other aspects of this diet or way of eating. In fact, if you have a fridge or a freezer with non-animal products, separate all the animal products from everything else in that fridge so you know exactly where to go every time you need to get into that fridge or that freezer. You want it all in one place so that all your options are available to you when you get there. For example, you made a plan to eat X, Y, and Z throughout a day, but throughout the day you decide instead of Y, you want to eat Q. So if everything is all together, you can make that choice better so you don't roam around into the wrong areas of the fridge and end up eating something off the diet. And in my opinion, just ignore every other part of the fridge or freezer that doesn't have animal products. Also, if you have a pantry, get any animal products out of there and get all those animal products into one spot that's outside of the pantry. Now, most pantries will not have animal-based products in there because those degrade over time if they don't have preservatives, and they're usually stored in the fridge or freezer. But if you have an exception for something like canned tuna or whatever, you want to avoid the pantry at all costs. And if somehow there's a way of keeping all the animal products in one location, just keep it outside of the pantry. For example, I have a section over here where I would put foods that I want set aside for myself that wouldn't be animal-based products, just to make sure that none of my family gets it. But I think this sort of logic applies to animal-based products. Find a spot for all your non-refrigeratable or non-frozen animal products. Keep it all in that one spot, so if you ever have to go there, you can go there. And it also protects it in case there's others in the house and they may want to take from that allotment. Supplements. Don't take any supplements. Take medication if you must, as prescribed by your doctor, although work with your doctor if you're planning on doing this experiment. But Avoid supplements if at all possible. Protein powders, BCAAs, all that kind of stuff. They're not needed if you choose healthy foods in the first place. The cost that you spend towards supplements and vitamins and mineral pills and all that kind of stuff should really go towards real food. Carnivore is nutritionally complete unless you make an effort to compromise this way of eating. Food, not drinks. Get as few calories from beverages as possible, especially alcohols and sodas, because they're essentially off the plan. Drinks like milk or kefir, in my opinion, should be discouraged, at least at first. I think you should focus on water as your beverage of choice. It in and of itself is a macronutrient. And some people like to make exceptions for coffee and tea. I totally get that. Or some zero-calorie drinks. I've done that in the past. Or I'll get like a Monster Energy Zero Ultra or something, and I'll drink that in the morning. But if you must drink those because you just can't go without it, don't add any sugar to them. So like drink your coffee black, and if you drink tea, try not to add any sweeteners, even the artificial ones. Electrolytes. Now most meat-based meals will have adequate amounts of needed minerals, but you may want to add a little bit of salt to taste to some of your foods or even some of your drinks. Some people like to add electrolytes to drinking water, and that's fine. Snake juice is an example, and I've used that before myself, and I think that's fine. Tracking. If you're interested in tracking what you're doing, only track what's important to you and what you can track from day one through the last day of this carnivore journey or this month challenge or whatever you're doing. If you try to track more than what you can reasonably sustain, you may stop tracking overall. And even worse, you might even stop the carnivore diet. So don't put yourself in that situation. Decide what you can do for the entire month and only do that much. If you want to add some bonus tracking, like at the end of it, you're welcome to do that, but don't rely on that. In my case, I'll be tracking calories and my weight each Sunday morning and my weight on the last day of this month, as well as recording my food each and every day and making videos for this YouTube channel. But that's what I've personally signed up for because I know I can do it all. And I've done it all before. But if I somehow stop some or even all of my tracking, I'm still going to do the diet. Even if you never see another video on this channel, I will be doing this diet throughout the rest of the month of January, World Carnivore Month, because I think that is more important than tracking it. Higher fat intake. If you made the mistake of buying too much lean protein or you want to add some fats to your diet, be mindful not to add too much fat. But with that said, things like beef tallow, butter, lard, ghee, duck fat, suet, and fat trimmings are great examples of adding fat into your diet. And when I cook, for example, I'm always adding a teaspoon, or actually a tablespoon, into the pan or skillet that I'm using in order to heat the meal. In some cases, I might make 3 different things, and I use a tablespoon of butter for each of the 3 pans I use in that case. And sometimes I might economize and use butter in one pan to make the bacon, for example, and then turn around once I'm done with the bacon, use that same pan with a little bit of the residual bacon grease in it for eggs that I'm now cooking. Now, I don't do that often, and you'll see some videos where I've done that in the past on this channel where you see the final results. But there are options beyond butter is what I'm saying, and I'm just recommending you be willing to try them in order to get enough fat or get more fat into your diet. You might use raw grass-fed butter to grease the pan, for example, and then after you're done, maybe you're making a sirloin or something, you might add some beef tallow like as a glaze over the sirloin you just made in that same pan. So like when I make bacon, I don't go out of my way, like if I'm just making bacon in and of itself in a pan, I don't go out of my way to completely empty out all the excess bacon fat and pat everything down before I put it on a plate. I'll scoop everything out of the pan, put it onto the plate, and then if there's a little bit of excess liquid bacon fat that's on it, that's fine. I don't kill myself over that. Be well prepared, or to be more clear, prepare your meat effectively. I'm not going to advise anyone to eat raw meat. That's not what this channel is about. That's something other channels, other people on other channels can do. But what I recommend is cooking at least lightly, either rare, medium well, or even well done, but no further than that. I'm not a fan of burning any meat, but I'm also not a fan of not cooking meat at all. I cook every animal product that I make, or at least all the meats that I make. Cheese, obviously, I make. No, I don't cook cheese. But anyways, you may want to add some salt as well to any of the side of the meat you cook, like on the skillet or pan or whatever. Or if you make eggs, you might add some, Himalayan sea salt or Celtic sea salt, Himalayan pink salt or Celtic sea salt into those eggs, for example. But in my opinion, you want to cook all your meats, at least to some extent. Prioritize the types of meat. For example, beef is usually better than pork from a nutritional standpoint. I would say on average, which is often better than poultry. I personally don't like seafood, but the quality there can be really all over the place depending upon its source. But if you eat fish or anything that used to swim in a former life, then you need to opt for higher quality options of whatever you choose. A lot of this becomes irrelevant if you buy really high quality versions of these types of meat, whatever animal it came from, but it just can't hurt to prioritize some meats over the other during your carnivore journey. Maybe you like beef more than pork, so just eat more beef over time. So another thing to prioritize is the age of food source when possible. The younger, the better, basically, because it hasn't gone through maybe as much abuse or malnourishment as, say, older sources of meat are. For example, calf liver is better than beef liver. Calf meat is often more expensive than regular beef of the same type, sirloin or whatever. Also, eggs are often packed with nutrients for the same reason, which is why I don't recommend against eating eggs over time. So I would eat more eggs than I would eat, like baked chicken, for example. So that's how I prioritize stuff. Limit cheeses, at least at first, as too much cheese, just like too much milk, can cause constipation, even though cheese is an excellent source of fats. There are traces of carbs too, from lactose, but there are a lot of options here like cheddar, Colby, Mexican cheese, American, Parmesan, etc., etc. But in my opinion, you don't want to eat a block of cheese. You might shred a little bit into your eggs to make an omelet, like with ham or bacon, or you might throw some in a bowl of beef, to sort of thicken it up. You might make some burger patties and throw a slice or two on top of each, burger. But just don't go overboard, especially in the first days of this diet. Let your body adapt to cheese over time unless you already eat a bunch of cheese and you're just totally used to it and it doesn't cause you constipation or any other problems. Spices and seasonings. In my opinion, the point of this diet is to cut back on spices, although you may keep salts if you want them. I'm personally fine with my wife adding a few seasonings or spices to the meals that she sometimes makes for me. Like she'll make some pork chops and she'll throw a bit of seasoning on it. I'm not going to peel all that off and just eat the whole thing. But I never personally add spices or seasonings to any meats that I prepare. I don't think these knock you out of the carnivore diet in a technical sense, but if you're trying to use carnivore as an elimination diet, then you definitely want to cut out all spices and seasonings. Certainly at first until you feel like you can add one or the other and then see how your body reacts and then use that over time in sort of a troubleshooting manner. Sauces. I personally only think sauces made from animal products are worth considering here. So I'm against adding any sauces unless it comes exclusively from the animal kingdom. And you can make sauces in a variety of ways from different animals. I just think that it's better to use these sparingly, or if you want to change things up from time to time, but not as a default for every carnivorous meal that you make. So that's some of the tips that I can think of off the top of my head. Please add other tips into the comments below. I'll like or whatever any of those that are not included here. Any tips you have that you think would better give people doing this diet a better experience, not just for the World Carnivore Month, but for other carnivore journeys. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.